Welcome to the Enduro Method podcast. Today, Dana and I will be discussing why practice matters.
Why practice matters.
So first, we're going to start off quickly with just kind of a definition of practice, or what I would actually like to kind of term deliberate practice. So just very intentional. So deliberate practice occurs when an individual intentionally repeats an activity in order to improve performance. The claim of the deliberate practice framework is that such behavior is necessary to achieve high levels of expert performance. What do you think?
Sounds like deliberate practice to me.
So what's that mean? And why do it? I know just from, I'll be going off of just my own experience a lot of times in this and kind of how I've learned things over time, but it's always when I've kind of regressed off of the main thing. So like you have this big complex thing you're trying to learn, which could be dirt bike and it could be a sport, any of that stuff. And usually, right, when you go to practice, you're not actually doing the game, playing the game. You're actually taking a very small piece of that game and you're breaking it down into smaller parts and you're trying to learn it. Mm-hmm. And so like when I started riding a dirt bike, it never occurred to me for years that was a viable option. I don't know why. Practice. Yeah, I never made the connection that, if I can't get up this rock or over this log, I should turn around and go back and practice or find a log in a safer spot. Maybe that's not on a trail 10 miles in or whatever, and go practice this log. Like it was always, that's part of the trail. You got over it. Let's go. Mm-hmm. And so in like 3 years time, maybe I did 50 logs, right? Just throwing some numbers out there. Whereas I could have done 50 logs in an hour.
Right.
And done that once a week and all of a sudden had 2,000 logs under my belt, right, of going over them. And had that much if I had taken that thing and actually practiced it. So yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about and why practice, right? One of the first things is being honest about the difficulty of learning something new.
I was just going to pump the brakes real fast and say, like, both you and I come from team sport backgrounds.
Yeah.
Where I think it's super interesting is, like, we went to practice. We practiced, whatever sport you were in. It was, for us, it was every day. And then games on the weekends. But like you were saying, you're breaking it down, breaking movements down, breaking sequences down. But, after team sport era is over, you find, I consider, dirt biking is an individual sport, so there's no, for us where we are, there's no official practice. There's, we've created maybe small groups locally, but, and that would be coming up, as later in the podcast maybe, but it's now, you have to set that up for yourself type thing.
Right. I don't know. I feel like it has to do a lot with, I don't know if it is an individual sport thing or maybe it's the outdoor individual sport thing, but like think about learning to ski. You didn't go practice what you sucked at. You just went up the lift, went down the mountain, went up the lift, went down the mountain, same with snowboarding, like whatever. And then if you do meet some of these higher level people in that sport early on, you realize that they're not just going up the lift and going down the mountain. Right, they're taking these techniques that they want to learn and breaking them down into manageable pieces until they're better at them, and then putting it all together. And pretty soon you're like, that guy can do like a 720, and you're like, why can't I do that? It's like, right, but he started with a 180 over this tiny little thing, mm-hmm. right? And he did that over and over and over, or she, and then progressed to this big trick. Mm-hmm. But we don't ever see that, and I don't know if Instagram's a part of it or like the social media world that we live in. Like all you see is this cool shit that's being done and you can't do it. You're like, well, I should just go try that cool thing. Right? But
some people get away with it.
Very few, right? But that's like a 6-foot wall or a 4-foot wall, and there's a problem of thinking you can just start where somebody you see is at, and then that's what you need to practice, where in reality you need to drop way back and start with this little 6-foot log, or 12-inch, right, and like hit it over and over until you can get this, all of these things to align, which then gives you the skill set to go on later and conquer these bigger tasks. I mean, this was originally like an Arnold Schwarzenegger thing, but I always use it in reference like Graham Jarvis. Like, you don't go and practice what Graham Jarvis is doing now to be like Graham Jarvis. Like, you'd need to go back, 45, started like age 7. So where we're at, like, I need to go back to when he was probably like 12 years old and practice what Graham Jarvis was doing at 12. And then that would give me a better foundation to progress from than like watching his greatest hits on Instagram and being like, cool, I'm going to go try that trick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting. You just said like you learn to ski and you just go up and down the mountain, and it's kind of interesting. I feel like that's very similar to our dirt biking career. Like, it was like go on a ride, and like, you know, now recently as we've tried, you know, to continue to get better, we've sought out other people, and I feel like now I'm at a point where I'm starting to learn the actual things that I'm doing, whereas before I'd be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I just got from A to B.
right. No, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with getting from A to B. Right.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like,
I learned so much just going out on trail rides that I was probably overwhelmed. But on the flip side, if you did practice that along the way, you would just get there so much faster.
Or just fill in the gaps.
Yeah, but your progress, instead of looking like a long linear line with a slight incline, right, might look a little bit more elliptical and going up. So you can just triple your time, maybe, I don't know, something like that. Make progress way faster by breaking some of these skills down in a safe environment, and a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but not too far. Yeah, and getting better. All right, so back to the first part here. Acknowledge the challenge, right? Be honest about the difficulty of learning something new. Expect to make mistakes. Celebrate effort instead of achievement, almost, right? Like,
Or instead of quitting or getting frustrated. Like
yeah,
me.
totally. I mean, and there's something to say too for people who are naturally gifted or pick things up fairly quickly. It's actually hard sometimes to have the humility to suck. And so you'll see people like, I don't want to do that. I don't give a shit about that. And they actually might, but they don't do it because it's challenging. So I think creating an environment that embraces kind of the courage to do new things and get out of your comfort zone is important, instead of having that kind of being in the surroundings where you get made fun of for failing. I mean, I think you should get made fun of for failing, but in a good-hearted way.
Yeah. I think, honestly, to me, this was more internal. I specifically tend to get really frustrated and kind of have negative self-talk when I try things and I can't do it. So, you know, I would say I don't really ever experience that from the outside world. You know, I feel like I surround myself with pretty awesome people. Hey. But I feel that can go internal. You know, you've gotten on me, like, it's fine. It's fine to fail. It's okay. Keep trying. And it's, you know, like, for instance, on the silly static balance stuff, you know, you watch people on Instagram and do it and they're sitting there, no problem. And it's like, you go and try it. And then you're like, I can't link 3 seconds together. Oh my God. And of course you know, and then you're like, keep trying. And it's really that constant battle of emotions of like, this is frustrating. And, you know, take that back to team sports. You know, you get frustrated, you know, practicing free throws for an hour and you miss like 10 in a row and you get frustrated. And then instead of like calling it quits, it's like, okay, go until you score 10 or whatever. So reframing that mindset to try and be more acceptant of how difficult and challenging it may be. And sometimes, you're going to have a crap practice.
Yep.
Sometimes you're going to have crap practices, and sometimes you're going to have great practices. It's just like the rides, too. Games are rides. Sometimes you win some, and sometimes you lose some. Sometimes you're really on, and you're riding really well and feeling smooth and loose. And then sometimes you're riding, you're staring at your front fender, and you're like, what in the world is going on? You're all tight. So that's the same to be said for, when you're practicing.
Yeah, growth mindset.
Growth mindset. What is growth mindset?
A willingness to embrace hardship. Yeah.
Insert Carol Dweck's book.
Susan.
I think it's Carol Dweck.
Susan?
It's
something Dweck.
definitely...
It's called the growth mindset, so that's it.
Okay.
Now I'm confused. I can't remember.
Carol Dweck.
Who's Susan? Duckworth?
I don't know.
It might be Susan Duckworth.
I don't know Susan.
Wrote Grit, which is similar. Also a fantastic book.
Maybe we'll have the wherewithal to link these books in the show notes.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, boy.
All right.
So first one was acknowledge the challenge.
Yep. Next one would be limiting the scope. And this would kind of go back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier with kind of the logs on the trail or practicing logs. If you're out on a trail ride or you're out in the desert or in the woods or whatever on a track, there's a lot going on. There's like multiple different things constantly that you're like, I could work on that. I need to improve this. I need to improve that. But you kind of, to get the most out of that deliberate practice idea, it's limiting that scope down to one or two things and then working on those one or two things till you've not even mastered, but let's just say become fairly competent, right? You've raised that one up a little bit and you're like, okay, this one's still super low, so maybe I need to drop back. If I could raise this one up, and then once I get all my skills up over time to a certain level, then you can kind of go back, pick through them again, take that one you want to go up first, practice that deliberately for a little while, and then kind of move on. So I still think the log thing's a great example because literally when you're out on and again, I'm just going back to trail rides because that's kind of what we grew up doing, or grew up.
It's what we do.
Yeah, after like 2015-ish. Anyways, so out on the trail, when you get to a hard section, it's all about getting through the hard section and continuing on with the trail ride. Because usually we're doing, a loop or something. And so we're trying to get back to the truck. We still don't know what's going to happen. Flat tires, somebody gets hurt, daylight, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like you're usually, and it could depend on the crew you ride with. Maybe some people do go back and session things, but for us, that was never really something we did. Like every now and then it'd be like, I screwed that up, I'm gonna redo it. But it was like, get through it. All right, cool. Everybody's done with the hard section. Now we're, continuing on. So yeah, taking the time to set something up or find something that gives you, makes you a little nervous or that you have a hard time with and, getting reps in.
Yeah, I think the point of what you're saying is that, pick something specific and work on it. Not like try and be a master of all trades.
Yeah, jack of all trades, master of none, eventually. But in the beginning, you need to narrow that down to, one thing.
And I guess that's just deliberate to what you're practicing.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely important to not get, and this, I'd say within the last year for me, has been something. So, I'll go out in the backyard and pick one thing and literally hit it for a half hour. And
he really does.
It made a massive difference for me. And like, if I could have been doing that 2-3 years ago, it would have been monumental. But I'm stoked that I've learned it now. And I enjoy it too. I've always liked practicing. I mean, even team sport stuff, like back in the day, I was all about it. So that wasn't that hard for me, but the concept of doing it, I hadn't, for whatever reason, made the connection. But yeah, it makes a big difference. So the next one is commit time. And that's where that falls in. Like, you just got to set the time aside. Because the other part is, even though I like practicing, I don't always want to go do it. And it's hard. Sometimes I'm tired, it sucks, I'm hungry, I don't want to do anything. But after I've done it, I've never regretted it. Kind of like training. Off the bike training.
Like workouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Staying fit. But setting a block of time apart that you know you can hit every week, or if your schedule is super crazy, maybe committing 15 minutes pre-ride on the weekend, to some figure eight drills or some slip in the clutch drills, or even getting the front wheel up, or pivot turns, or logs, or whatever it is for you that you feel like would be a great thing to add to your rides. Blocking that time out. And from experience, it's better to do if you're doing it on a ride before the ride than after. Because after the ride, it's a little harder to get that stuff in sometimes. You're tired, flat tire, whatever. There's always reasons.
And that's why, this is Enduro Method podcast, but this is why we formatted Enduro Method the way we did, with Wednesdays being Bike Skills Day.
Right.
Obviously it's easier to do it with people, I think, which I guess we'll get into in a second, but having a little bit of incentive, you've invested in Enduro Method, and so, you're more likely to, hopefully more likely to do these and practice it, and practice the skills and drills that we have on the Bike Skills Day.
Yeah, and it is on Wednesdays, but honestly, I know that not everybody can just be like, oh, cool, it's Wednesdays, I'm going to load my bike up and go ride and find a rock and go practice this, getting over the rock, But what you can also take away from that is exactly this, like, commit some time to practice, deliberate practice, and man, you'll see improvement. I read it was a good little post. I think it was like Jordy Pascucci. I'm probably screwing that up. But he said something about breaking it down at a percentage. Like, you should have 25% of your ride be skill practice, 50% is like kind of fitness or cardio practice, and then this would be on the bike, and then 25% is like free ride play, right? Because he's like, you can't just train and ride all the time and do intervals or motos or whatever. Like, you need to do what you love to do on a bike, because what we all love to do is just go screw around and ride. And so not just get so caught up in the fact that it's only practice, it's only motos, it's only intervals, it's only training. Like, no, it's some of both, a little bit of balance.
And then you could be stuck in the other way, where it's
like 90% free ride and
0.1% practice.
Practice loading the bike in and out of the truck.
yeah. Got that down. Lots of practice there.
Yeah, so commit time. For me, I got a couple rocks in the backyard, and I would go do 100. It would be a stuff and smash, essentially double blip. This would be Rich Larson lingo, kind of on that rock. So I'd try and get 100 of those in, and then after I got 100 in, which took anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, I would screw around with the little course I got back there and play some games. And
You're playing games?
Well, yeah. Like, don't put a foot down, I'm going to go over this line, and little games. So anyways, that was over the course before I screwed my hand up. I had a good 10 days like that, probably. So that's 1,000 little rock hops. And when I did get back to a race before I screwed my pinky finger up, it paid off. I mean, I'd hit little rock sections rock gardens with gaps in between and stuff like that, and I could carry the front wheel over and balance, and I'm still dabbing and putting feet down for sure, but it's clean. I'm not denting my pipe. Using way less energy, feeling confident, coming through that thing with energy and just being able to keep going. So, not all the time, of course, when I got it right. But it was really fun to see it kind of play out.
100%. It was pretty funny, and I raced sticks and stones up at Silver Mountain. It was some part in the creek section, and I was like, stuck on rocks, and then I was like, why am I not using some of these skills that I've been practicing and learned? Immediately, I did the technique, and went right over it, and it was like, durr.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Like, and it's funny, like, I feel like I've even got into bad habits from not practicing. So, like, just getting away with stuff and then, spending more energy than I need to. And then, like, taking a second to use some of these skills.
Right. Where's my rear tire? Weight the pegs. Control the throttle. Go right over it.
Oh, it was pretty funny. And then, like, there was 3 moments I remember very specifically, like, totally weighting the pegs and then continuing on, like, without, like, not expecting to keep moving, and I was just continuing moving.
Right.
And it was, like, it definitely was like, whoa. Like, I was expecting to go maybe 2 feet, and then I was, like, 10 feet later. Okay, that worked. And so, but, the more I practice that, the more familiar it's going to be. Because right now, familiar is spending more energy and, trying to push out of things and with not the proper technique. And the more I practice that, the more it'll become second nature for me to go resort to that technique rather than, like, previous not as good techniques.
Right. Well, that is the downside to being taller and stronger.
Right. So
Everybody thinks it's all roses, but there is a downside.
Yeah.
And that's you get away with terrible habits.
Yeah.
For a long time.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, you're so great. Yes, you are at an advantage to being tall, but I'm definitely can say
yeah, no, I'm not saying I want to be shorter. I'm just saying it's not all roses.
Yeah.
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 Find friends to train with.
Yeah, that's the other biggest piece. That goes back to team sports for me. Like, if somebody's there waiting for me, I'll show up. If it's up to me, I actually have a really hard time. Personally. Something I'm working on. But, find people that are like-minded and also want to improve.
Yeah.
And
again, who will ridicule you mercilessly for failing.
and get them to do it with you. I mean, it could be the same with training, even like working out. It's so much more fun to do it with people than to do it by yourself. I mean, obviously doing it alone is better than not doing it at all. But,
watching someone else suffer is better than listening to yourself suffer by yourself.
What?
I'm saying watching somebody else suffer next to you is better than just suffering alone by yourself.
Right, but I'm just saying that doing it by yourself is better than not doing it at all.
Oh, 100%.
And doing it with people is, I mean, if you're that kind of person, I feel like, we also own a gym and run group classes, so that's kind of where we see a lot of people thrive. So, I think, there's more energy to 2 people doing it than 1.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's cool to have some people along for the ride, and it's even more fun when you both start to see benefits from it, because it just kind of builds momentum in the right way.
Like your friends that you do they ride trials bikes and they go and practice things, but they're kind of like helping each other too, like coaching each other. You might have somebody that's a lot better than you that's providing tips and tricks for you to do, or like, hey, you should try this, or hey, you should try that. And then vice versa, like, if you're the better one and you're providing some tips and tricks, which can also help you get better.
Yeah. No, I think
and then you're able to recognize, oh, Joe Schmo his weight's way too far forward. He needs to get back on something.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, well, maybe I should pay attention to that with myself or whatever.
Yeah. I think, too, one more thing on this is like seeking out to ride with people who are better than you is an amazing way to learn. Not feeling like, well, that's a big ego issue if that's the case, but not riding with people because you're not the best one in the group. I
can't say I've ever been there.
like,
wouldn't know what that's like.
Yeah, I would always want to ride with people that are better than me because I can learn so much more. Mm-hmm. No, I like riding, period, but I will always seek out people who are better than me to ride with if possible.
That's why Josh doesn't like riding just with me.
I still learn things.
Okay, last piece.
That's a whole nother podcast. We learn a lot about communication.
Oh yeah, we should do a riding with your significant other podcast.
Right.
Tips and tricks.
And pitfalls. All right, last one we kind of got is consider coaching. So looking for some outside help. I know we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. We have on the bike part for the last probably 3 years, I think, kind of consistently sought out.
No, I mean, we've been doing it for a long time because we did the Shane Watson clinic for a
way
while
back
ago.
in. I forgot about that one.
Yeah,
and that was huge.
Yeah.
And again, like I feel you could treat these things like a farmer's market, maybe. I don't know if that makes any sense. And like just shop and do these things once a month, and you're not going to get a whole lot. You might get a little bit out of it, but like
I think you get a lot out of every one.
What I'm trying to say is if you do one and you go and deliberately practice a couple massive takeaways before you go do the next one, you're going to get more out of it. Yeah. Because instead of just getting like, hey, you need to practice static balance, but then you never practice static balance and you go to the next one and it's Cody Webb and he still says, I do static balance practice. And you're like, shit, I should do static balance practice. And then you go to the next one and it's Rich Larson and he says, hey, you should do static balance. And you're like, I knew that 6 months ago. And I still haven't put any of that into my repertoire, you're missing out. So what I'm saying is just if you do these things, which I highly recommend, practice, then go to the next one and you'll just level up that much quicker.
Yeah, I think getting into one period is awesome. I know there's a lot of different people doing it and we've gone through a handful and they've all been super helpful and that's just what we've done. I mean, we're coaches, so we seek out coaching. We're strength and conditioning coaches, not dirt bike. Well, actually I am. Yeah. But that leads me into the next point is, I did a Dirtastic clinic and I learned so much in that clinic, and then now I feel super fortunate enough that I'm coaching for them. And I think that going to these things is so valuable because you might, if you made it this far in this podcast, you might be going, okay, great, Dane and Josh, what in the heck should I practice? And so going to these events, specifically like Dirtastic, we set up a bunch of drills to practice that you can then go and take to your practice schedule, the everyday piece. But learning how to do them and learning them from, people that can break it down in a really easy to digest way is super helpful. That way, it gives you a little bit of context. That way you can have some coaching. Hey, Bobby, Joe, you need to practice, Bobby Joe, you need to practice X, Y, and Z, and so I do think the in-person stuff and going to these camps is super valuable to giving you tools to then implement into your own practice. And the whole principle behind this podcast is that second piece, you got to go and practice.
Yep.
I do actually believe within a weekend, I actually moved the needle. But then like I needed to continue to move the needle. But I even moved the needle at one of these sessions. And then it's up to me to continue moving the needle or bringing the bar higher or whatever it is.
Right.
But yeah, and then, you know, if your fitness, your physical fitness is something that, you know, is holding you back from your rides, or from, not holding you back from your rides, but holding you back from enjoying your time more so on the bike, you know, consider something like Enduro Method, or consider going to a local gym, you know, consider practicing your fitness, quote unquote, you know. The more you practice, the better you'll get. And that goes from skills on the dirt bike to your aerobic capacity to your strength. And they all carry over to basically having more fun on your dirt bike.
Yep. If you don't use it, you'll lose it.
Yep.
Yep. So, seek out coaching. Don't be scared. It's well worth the investment if it's something you want to invest in.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it sooner than later, too.
Totally.
Yeah. Anything else on it?
No. Hope you can go hope you go practice. Hope
Yeah.
we've inspired you to go practice what you love, whether that's dirt biking, and whether you're listening to this and you are really into, I mean, we're talking about skiing. You're really into skiing. If it's snowing, you should practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
set some time aside, and
yeah.
you know, it's your time to waste. So
Yeah.
make it happen.
Yep. So thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Enduro Method podcast. You can find us at enduromethod.com. You can find us on social media at Enduro Method. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@enduromethod.com. And we hope you enjoy the show, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks so much.
Thanks.